It is now my pleasure to turn today's program over to Jason Maynard, SVP of Strategy and Marketing. Jason, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, and good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending where you're at. Very excited to have you join us here on the Next Ready Business Tour Virtual Edition. We're calling in from all parts of the country here and bringing you I think some very valuable and interesting information. One of the things that we're doing here at NetSuite is we are bringing a whole host of speakers to help educate, inform, and talk about some of the changes that we see going on in business. At NetSuite, we've been talking about this notion of being ready for next and exploring why some companies seem better positioned to tackle the opportunities and to fight off the threats to their business and what makes these companies next ready. And so today, we're very pleased to have a host of speakers on the line with me today. From a structure standpoint, we're going to have our first speaker, Christopher Lochhead, who is the author of a best-selling book, Play Bigger, talk about category design and how companies can structure and dominate their markets, as well as our head of industry marketing, Ron Gabodla, with two of our customers to talk about some of the challenges and opportunities and how they have grown their businesses. So with that, I am going to turn the ball over to my good friend, Christopher Lochhead, who is going to talk about category design and how to create and dominate in business. Christopher, thanks for joining. Welcome. And
Jason, thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me. It's awesome to be here. And really what I want to share today is a dialogue around how you create your own next, and specifically do that by designing and dominating your market category. So this is really a dialogue about a new lens, a new way of looking at business. Bix Bixen, a mentor of mine and the legendary future hacker, says that most people and most companies are living inside of someone else's thinking. And what we know is that the companies who are able to take charge of the agenda in their space, ultimately create their own market category that they are then positioned to dominate, don't accept the rules of the game in the current market category they're in. They think about how they want to design a whole new way of thinking. Now, what's the biggest problem in business today? Too many solutions without a problem. You know, when I talk to entrepreneurs, CEOs, CFOs, CROs, UFOs, IUDs, DOGs, all of them really want to talk about their product. You know, if you ever go to a trade show or you get seated next to an excited product leader on the plane or any kind of environment where you're talking to somebody who's really into building their business, often what you hear is a lot of detail about their, if you will, their solutions, their products, their services, et cetera. And sometimes we forget that nobody buys a solution unless they have a problem. Now, in 2001, the legendary entrepreneur Bill Gates tried to launch a new product called the tablet PC. And the conversation that Gates and Microsoft had with the world and the market was, for the most part, a product or a feature conversation. And we all know how the movie ended. The category, and therefore the product, didn't take off. Why? Because nobody understood the distinction between a tablet PC and a laptop, or for that matter, a phone, although the phones were nowhere near as advanced, of course. And so the feature conversation led to nothing. A few short years later, Steve Jobs launched the iPad. And when he did, he said, the iPad creates and defines an entirely new category of device that will connect users with their apps and content in a much more intuitive and intimate way. And actually, what's very cool is it might even be today is the 10th anniversary of the launch of the iPhone. It is absolutely this week, which is very, very cool. And then, of course, the iPad came after that. Regardless, what Jobs did, and if you watch his iPad introduction on YouTube or video of it, what you'll see is a master sensei in not just designing innovative products, but really in teaching the world how to think about a problem and a solution in a very different way, such that a new market category opens up. And when Jobs launches iPad, he literally stands there and says, there's a slide that on one side has a picture of the MacBook and on the other side has a picture of the iPhone, and he says, let me tell you why this is a new category of device. And what he's doing is he's conditioning you and I and the world to think about a problem and a solution in a different way. And by doing so, he's really saying, hey, don't just buy 2 of our products, buy 3. And of course, many of us did. And today, if you were to spin iPad out of Apple, it would be a Fortune 500 company. Now, Archimedes famously said, give me a lever and a place to stand, and I will move the earth. Now, in business, most people pull 2 levers. And what they really believe is if people can just see their product, they'll fall in love with it. And so if they build an awesome carbidingulator and an awesome company, product and company, or if you will, service and company, once the world sees that service, it'll of course fall in love with it in the way the inventor, entrepreneur, pioneer did, and all will be good. There's also an unquestioned paradigm in business that some of us believe without questioning or challenging, which is the best product wins. And as we know, we look back through history, that's actually not always the case. It's often not the case. And yet many entrepreneurs, innovators, product leaders, and business leaders overall pray at the product altar. They just think, man, if we could get enough people to see it, of course they would buy it. Well, when you unpack what the legendary innovators do, and for our book Play Bigger, we did approximately $750,000 worth of primary research, both qualitative and quantitative research, including analyzing on the quantitative side, every startup created in the United States in the tech world from 2000 to 2015 that was backed by venture capitalists to study what happened to those tech companies who were backed by VCs. And what we learned is that the legends are different, that they pull 3 levers or levers. Are you a lever or a lever? That's a side conversation. But I digress. They pull 3, product, company, and category. And you could think of that as the magic triangle. And so when you step back and you start to analyze, what did Henry Ford do? What did Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, do? And of course, what did somebody like Jobs or Benioff do? They got product, company, and category right at the right time. And when you, if you will, prosecute the magic triangle, you are now positioned to be the dominant company in your market category. So now I'd like to kind of, with that as a frame up, share with you this new business discipline called category design. And the sort of first aha is, just like you can design a company, a business model, of course, like you could design a product, the legendary innovators realized that you could design the way a market category works. So if you ever take a step back and look at any market and say, well, why is it like that? So one of my favorite simple examples is I find it fascinating that a pair of high-end sunglasses can sell for in excess of $300, and you and I can go to a discount retailer, a Costco or a Best Buy or something like that, and buy a fairly sophisticated high-end flat-screen TV for $150 to $200. And when you look at it and you step back, you say, well, wait a minute. One of these products is a piece of plastic that you wrap around your face to keep sun rays out. And one of these things is a highly sophisticated piece of technology that talks through cables and satellites and delivers, you know, more channels than we could ever need, of course. And you say, well, if you didn't know which product is $300 and which product is $150, most of us, certainly I, would think that the television is the more expensive product. And yet that's obviously not the case. And so What I'm suggesting that we consider is that the way every market category behaves, and in particular what sets up the market category, which is a framing in the mind of customers and prospects around a problem and a solution, and the value associated with addressing both of those. And so those things happen in the world such that you and I assign value in different ways to different product or market categories. And what I'm suggesting to you is that the legendary innovators proactively do that. Whereas most of us launch our products and companies into an existing market and we hope the world figures out why they're legendary. That's not what Ford did, that's not what Blakely did, and it's certainly not what Jobs did. They were proactive about designing their market category. The legendary venture capitalist at Sequoia Capital, who's been number one for 4 years running on the Sequoia list of top VCs in the world, says Play Bigger is the new how-to guide for entrepreneurs and executives who want to build legendary, enduring companies. And what he's really talking about is this concept of designing a category. Further, Anne Mirabeau, who's a guest professor at Stanford, and she's also the co-founder of another top venture capital firm here in Silicon Valley, says category design is a principle that every successful entrepreneur has intuitively embraced, an absolute must for every person interested in the secret sauce found in Silicon Valley. Now, let's talk about the data science behind this and why becoming a category designer and prosecuting the magic triangle is a pathway to, if you will, increasing the odds of success, and I would even argue an unfair competitive advantage. All right, so we have a good friend named Ray Wang, and he wrote an incredibly important book a few years ago, a bestseller from Harvard Business Press called Disrupting Digital Business. And in there, Ray and his team examined what's happened to the Fortune 500 over the last 15 or so years, and what they discovered is 52% of them are no longer part of the Fortune 500. And in general, of course, this is a mass a stereotype. Fortune 500 companies tend to be more conservative, of course, than startup companies. And a dear friend of mine, Nick DiGiacomo, years ago said to me, you know, when I was a young up-and-coming pup in business, he said, well, Christopher, you have to understand that big companies are conservative because they have something to conserve. And yet it's interesting, this sort of conservative stance is yielding a 50% chance of failure. Now, Eddie Yoon, who's written extensively for the Harvard Business Review, he's considered the #1 category guru to the Fortune 100, particularly in consumer products companies. He wrote a story for the HBR a little while ago, and incidentally, he's got a new book out called Super Consumers that is a fascinating and insightful way to think about customers and categories today. In his HBR article, what he says is category creation is the ultimate growth strategy. And the data science research that he and his team did was they looked at companies that they considered to be category creators and companies that they considered not to be. So that was kind of an assessment they made based on, you know, of course, their experience. And then they looked at the difference in their market cap, and what they discovered is companies that are viewed as category designers or category creators pioneering new spaces, for every dollar of revenue on the top line growth they get a, and I love this word, incremental $5.60 in market cap. So what we know is investors massively reward companies that they believe can design and dominate new categories. Now this next slide explains why. In our research for Play Bigger, as I mentioned, we built a big data store of every tech venture-backed company in the U.S. from 2000 through to 2015. And in particular, we tracked all the financings that they did, and where data was available, and the data is getting, you know, better over time here, we looked at how their market cap, or if you will, evaluation as a private company grew as they raised venture capital. So that was one thing that we studied. And then the other thing we studied which is a bit different. If you think of, marketing guys, so to speak, you might think we'd measure market share. Well, market share is critically important. But what we wanted to know is what percentage of market cap went to the category king, the leader in the space. And the number you see on the slide, 76%. And it was incredibly eye-opening to us. So we took all the companies in each category and we looked at their market caps or private valuations, whichever the case was, and this is what we discovered. And so what's the big takeaway? We are increasingly living in a winner-take-all world. And while this is data that is centered on tech companies, the dynamics that create tech categories and allow tech companies to achieve extraordinary growth rates, those opportunities, those dynamics are filtering into many, many markets. If you don't think your category, your space is going to be affected by tech dynamics, just have a conversation with a taxi driver about what's happened in their market category over the last few years. And so regardless of whether you're a tech company or not, we think the right headset to have in business is one company in our space is going to take the vast majority of the economics. How do we get to be that company? Now, it's also interesting to take a step back and say, okay, well, if this keeps happening, there must be a dynamic here in how these categories behave. And this graph you're seeing is from Paul Gorowski's work called The Evolution of New Markets, published by Oxford University Press. And what you're seeing here is Gorowski says that categories go through three simple phases: define in the beginning, develop, and then dominate. And what he says with these two lines here is that in the beginning, in the define phase, as more companies, venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, existing players spy an emerging category potential in a new place where they think there's a real opportunity for growth, it's almost as if somebody stands up and screams, "Everybody into the pool!" And a whole bunch of vendors, either startups or incumbents, attack this new market category to try to mine this potential, if you will. And so the dotted line you see, it represents the number of vendors in the first phase. What happens is the category takes off, if the category takes off. In the second phase, the develop phase, is one company emerges as the leader, the category king, and you and I as customers and consumers flock to that company, and as the category takes off, that's the one that drives all the market cap and ultimately gets to 76% of the value creation in the space. And that happens over and over again. Last year, the HBR published some of the research that's in our book, Play Bigger, and what this research is showing you is the answer to the question, does the age of the company at time of IPO make a difference? Is it any kind of an indicator for a company's ability to create long-term enduring value? And we actually asked a couple questions in the data set. We said, does the amount of money a tech startup raises matter in terms of its ability to create long-term enduring value? The answer to that question was actually no. And the answer to the question is, does the age of the company at time of IPO matter in the context of creating enduring value? And to be clear, our definition of enduring value for this research was you take the closing price of the stock on day one of trading, and then you look at it going forward. And here's the aha. This thing we call the IPO sweet spot, and now a lot of people refer to it as the quote-unquote 610 law, which is, at least in the tech space, folks, the companies that create all the enduring market cap value go public between 6 to 10 years of age. That's what the data set shows. And here's the 6 to 10 law, and here's the overlay of the companies that we looked at. Now, here's sort of the really big aha. We took the Gorowski chart and the 610 law, and we overlaid them because we thought, well, there must be a connection between the way categories behave and the 610 law. And sure enough, there is. And you see it in this graph, which is the companies that go public in the develop phase, which ties to 6 to 10 years, are the ones that create all the value. And so what do we think that says? At least in the tech world, and we think it's germane for a lot of others, we think what it's telling us is it takes 6 to 10 years to prosecute the magic triangle, emerge as the category king, get public, crush the competition, and take all the economics. Now, Victor Hugo famously said, all the forces in the world are not so powerful as an idea whose time has come. The question is, how do we make it our time? And I think the answer to that question is category design. So category designers are all about problems, and either an existing problem that's well known. So if you think about the problem that Lyft and Uber solved, the problem of personal transportation, we all understood that problem, and there were many solutions to that problem. And then those companies reimagined the problem in the context of new technology, and ba-boom. In the case of Clarence Birdseye, who is the innovator of the frozen food market category, and if you will, the category designer of frozen food in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, he saw a problem that none of us knew we had, which is, how come I can't have fresh vegetables in winter? And so there's two types of problems, one that we know we have that gets materially reimagined, and one that we don't know that we have, fresh vegetables in winter. Regardless, category designers fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Jack O'Neill, the legendary inventor of the surf wetsuit, who recently passed away, I'm a surfer and I live here not far from Jack in beautiful Santa Cruz, California. He famously said, I'm just a surfer who wanted to build something that would allow me to surf longer. And so a lot of the most legendary category designers are people who experience the problem, and to quote the Big Lebowski, they say, hey, this aggression will not stand, man, and they get really focused on the solution. If you read the story of how Sarah Blakely decided she wanted to create Spanx, she wanted to look better in certain kinds of outfits, and she didn't like what the market provided, and it's the same kind of thing. So legendary innovators have this insight around a problem, and then they get busy. Here's another great example. This is a $2 billion plus category called the energy shot market. And Manoj, the founder of 5 Hour Energy, he had this insight. He said, when you're tired, why do I have to drink a whole lot of coffee? Or why do I have to drink a giant monster drink? What if I just want to pick myself up? And I don't want to have a quote-unquote caffeine crash afterwards. And so rather than competing head-on with Red Bull or Starbucks, he designed a new space that he called the energy shot. He made everything different about it, and it was predicated on an insight that went like this: just because I'm tired doesn't mean I'm thirsty. Jeff Bezos created the cloud company today. Our friend Bob Evans, one of the thought leaders in information technology, says that AWS is the most important company in the cloud today, based on a very simple insight, which is, what if we sold our excess compute power to the world? And today, Amazon AWS is that influential. Now, we're living in a world of an assault on our attention. You and I get between 40 to 60,000 marketing messages a day, never mind our emails and our text and all that stuff. And so the real question is, how do we stand out? And in the paradox of choice, Barry Schwartz says, we look for ways to make fewer choices in the face of all those choices. So you and I as consumers actually want less choice because we can't deal with 40,000 marketing messages a day. And so we use this thing called categories to, if you will, slot products, companies, or brands into a mental drawer, or to tag them in our head. So for example, if you just had a kid, or maybe if you were like my sister Carolyn, when she found out she was pregnant with triplet girls, one of the things her and her husband figured out was, hey, we need a minivan, because that category of vehicle solves a problem called how the, I was going to say a swear word there, how the something, you're going to deal with carting 3 little girls all around. And so they started investigating minivans. What they didn't look at buying was a muscle car. And so if you were Ford and you were marketing muscle cars to Carolyn, every dime of marketing was money being lit on fire, because people care about categories before they care about products, services, or brands. And let me say something outrageous, but I ask you to try this thought on for consideration. The category makes the company, not the other way around. And people categorize categories or prioritize them into three buckets: must have, nice to have, and not interested. And I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I've been in many conversations with CEOs and CMOs and UFOs and the like, where somebody says, you know, our problem is we're kind of like a vitamin and we need to be an aspirin. And what they're saying is our category isn't urgent. It isn't a must-have for people, and how do we solve that? Category designers pay attention to what things are called. You and I don't call a killer whale a sea panda. But when you say sea panda, it changes the way you think about, in this case, an animal. And so category designers use languaging to change thinking. A demarcation point in language creates a demarcation point in thinking, and a demarcation point in thinking creates a demarcation point in action. When I was growing up, the people who lived on the street were called winos and bums. Today we call them homeless people. If you will, that's category design at the social level. Why did that evolve? Simply because our society is going to treat and interact a homeless person differently than we will treat and interact with a bum. And so languaging changes the way, or if you will, conditions the way you and I think. Late last year, TechCrunch ran an article. You see the headline here. It says, "Smartwatch sales are tanking." And the first thing they say at the beginning of the article is, maybe not everyone is convinced they need a smartwatch. Translation, Apple did, and I'm going to say the word lousy to be polite, category design when they launched the smartwatch. That is to say, Cook had a features conversation with the market. He didn't do what Jobs did with the introduction of the iPhone and the iPad. He did more like what Gates did with the introduction of the tablet PC. And so when Apple stood there and said, hey, look at all these cool features, and it connects to your phone, and it's this, it's that, and then it's places, and it's dices, and it does all this stuff, the world said, hey, I don't know why I need this. Translation, this product category doesn't solve a problem I understand or relate to, therefore I'm not buying it. And as a side note, I think it's a bummer that one of the greatest category design companies in the world no longer understands category design. Now, what are the things that drive market cap or valuation? This may be a bit of a controversial discussion, particularly for the CFOs and finance-related folks. But again, I ask you just to consider this, even if your brain tells you this is violently wrong. Because I talk to finance people, and what they generally tend to believe is the drivers of valuation and market cap are revenue growth, EBITDA growth, margin expansion, et cetera. I'd ask you to consider the following, that the three drivers of market cap are, one, the perception investors have of the size and the growth rate of your category. Or said a different way, is this going to be a giant space? Number two, the perception that investors have in, if you will, your category kingness. That is to say, do investors believe, if they believe the first one, this is going to be a giant category, then the second thing they need to believe is that your company can prosecute the magic triangle and take 76% of the economics. And then the third thing they look at, and this is where the numbers are important, is do your metrics, and sometimes they're financial and sometimes they're other things, do your metrics support that you're becoming the category king in a giant new space that matters? And when investors look at you through that lens, that's how you get to a place where, companies like most recently WhatsApp, for example, the largest private acquisition in the history of the United States, I believe was around $22 billion. Private company gets acquired by Facebook, and most of the world says, hey, this is insane. This is a tiny company with hardly any employees, barely any revenue. The only possible explanation for why this happens is that weed is legal in California. And what they don't understand is that Facebook didn't buy their product, didn't buy their technology. What they bought was their position as the category king in a giant space that Facebook needed to own. And that's what drove that acquisition. And the truth is, that's what drives multiples of all companies. So what does all this mean? Here's your mission should you choose to accept it. Prosecute the magic triangle, solve a giant problem that matters, get public in 6 to 10 years, and become a legendary category king. That's the game. So if you wanted to do that, where might you start? I would suggest starting by answering these 3 questions. Number 1, what problem do we solve? And can you articulate that clearly? Number 2, if we solve it perfectly, what's the category? And if we earn 76% of the economics, how much are we worth? Develop a legendary point of view centered around evangelizing the problem. Airbnb, by way of example. Don't go there, live there, creating a whole new space that's not a hotel, a whole new category that most of us never could imagine. NetSuite, for example, cloud ERP, the first company to prosecute the magic triangle and take advantage of a whole new platform. I mentioned Sarah Blakely. She was the first to see the opportunity and the first to prosecute the magic triangle, and she's now a billionaire, and of course you can't live on that, but it's a hell of a start. We seem to, at least on my end, have lost the slides. I don't know if that's the case for all of you, but that's certainly the case for me. So let me end by sharing the following. Competition is for losers. Legendary category designers evangelize a problem to open up a new way of thinking about a solution and position themselves as a leader. The category makes the company. Xerox had a legendary brand, nobody cares. More recently, Facebook is a legendary brand, and they are the category king in social networking. And interestingly enough, Google, the category king in search, when they tried to attack Facebook in social networking, the Google brand didn't mean anything, and Google Plus failed because Facebook was already the category king. And why do I share that example with you? Most people, particularly marketers, believe it's about the brand. Well, Google has one of the most legendary brands ever created, and that brand could do nothing against the brand that was the category king in social networking. And so I posit to you again, it's the category that makes the company, it's the category that makes the brand. Legendary category designers evangelize and fall in love with the problem. They educate, or if you will, condition a market to think differently by being very clear about, we lovingly refer to them in the book as Frodos, the ability to move a market from one thing to another thing. A great example of a company that did this is Netflix. Netflix did not attack Blockbuster head-on. Instead, Reed Hastings and the team had a different perspective about how to move the market, and they taught you and I to stop driving to a store and go to a website, and that's ultimately what made them such a legendary company. And so in completion, you know, what I would share with you is get very clear about what makes you different, have the courage of your convictions, and understand that when you pull all 3 levers, product, company, and category, you increase the odds materially of becoming the company that takes 76% of your category. And what I would leave you with is it takes courage to be legendary, and I wish you a tremendous luck on building a legendary category king business. Now we'd like
Thanks so
to
much,
turn
Chris.
it over to Ranga.
Chris, I got I have your slides over, and I didn't know if you wanted to cover off on the legendary ideas. For some reason, it wasn't showing up in the WebEx, but I pulled up the slides, so you should see it now.
Yeah, I see it, but I think for the most part, hopefully, I got the points across without all the slides. And if people want them, I assume they can contact NetSuite, and we can give them the deck. Is that right?
Yep, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris, and you know, like I said, we'll come back, and if folks have questions, we'll definitely answer those. I have a few questions to follow up with you that we'll get to. But what we wanted to do now, at the next portion of this, Chris, and of course you are welcome to participate in this conversation as well, because we'd love to get your perspective, is we wanted to interview and talk with a few NetSuite customers, specifically, you know, companies that are just starting out. Have been around for more than just a little bit, but are fairly new into the market, and obviously trying to dominate their individual market spaces. And so I'm really pleased to introduce Greg Kish, who's the Sales and Marketing Director from Slingshot Sports, as well as Mark Mader, who's the President and CEO of SmartSheet. And wanted to basically go through a few questions with both of them around what their companies are doing, how they're thinking about their own success, and you know, if they had any perspective based on what Chris, you just shared with us as well. We wanted to go through that. So maybe I'll just start with Greg, and Greg, hopefully if you're unmuted, we can go ahead and start with you. And we're just if you can give us a little bit of background on Slingshot Sports. You know, the company itself, how long you guys have been around, and really what your focus is as an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this today, and it's an exciting time for us here at Slingshot. You know, our company was founded in 1999 with basically the invention of the sport of kiteboarding, and you know, we kind of embraced and saw opportunity with this new water sport, and we have two founders, Jeff and Tony Lagosche, and they were old windsurfers that thought, hey, this kiteboarding thing's going to work. Fast forward to 2017, and we've kind of evolved into a full-service water sport brand that designs, markets, and distributes products for, you know, kiteboarding, wakeboarding, wake surfing, stand-up paddleboarding, and our most recent kind of, you know, market has been the foil boarding market. So that's a new category that is emerging in water sports, and you know, we're pretty excited about that. Our company, thanks to NetSuite, honestly, has also been able to add some additional brands. We launched a longboard skateboard brand called Moonshine Manufacturing in 2014, and then in 2015 we added another brand called Ride Engine, and that's our kind of our water sports accessory brand. You know, wetsuits, bags, accessories for the hard goods kind of stuff. And you know, our product is available globally, and we have a more traditional distribution network of, you know, importers, retailers, schools, and, you know, rental operations that use our product. But you know, we've come a long way in the past 18 years in building the business.
Awesome, thank you, Greg. And you know, obviously, SmartSheet's a very different type of company. You know, with Greg, obviously, and more on the distribution and retail and manufacturing side, and then SmartSheet clearly in the software space. Mark, if you could just give us your thoughts, just a little bit of background on SmartSheet. You guys are a relatively new company, and really trying to change up what people are doing in on the spreadsheet side of things. If you could give us a little bit of background, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. We're up in Seattle. We're a growth stage software as a service company. Greg, your business sounds super cool. I wish I could enjoy some of those products. But what we're doing is we are disrupting how about 1.2 billion people globally have interacted with tools like Excel to track and manage their work. And when I say work, it's less about like the ERP workloads, CRM workloads, HRIS workloads. It's more about the work all of us do every single day that we track, manage, automate, and report on in largely manual way. So there are about 1 billion folks 900 or million or so knowledge workers who track stuff every day. And what we did is we wanted to develop a service that could help people graduate from sort of a hand-to-mouth process of manually doing things in a way where you could benefit with all the stuff around collaboration and automation for projects and processes. But the big difference is make it available to any team and organization on the dimension of dev or tech competency required. So how do you take someone who's not a citizen developer, not from Northern California, and super comfortable with all the latest and greatest technologies, and make it possible for them to succeed? So we launched this service in about 2010. Our flagship product, SmartSheet, was relaunched. We're about 100 million recurring business today, growing north of 60% year on year. Serve 70,000 distinct brands and about 190 from. And this is one of the challenges in the business that NetSuite's helping us with, serving customers ranging from like folks of 20, ranging to the Ciscos of the world. So very, very diverse population, ranging from contribution, like revenue per year of $300 a year to $2 million a year. So a very, very diverse population of customers, but really it's signaling that this is a common need at scale regardless of company dimension. And that diversity, while it presents opportunity, also introduces a lot of complexity and texture on the operations. So that's one of the reasons we pivoted to and migrated to NetSuite in the last year. And what we believe deeply is that the world is accelerating in terms of what people are expected to do, the number of things they're expected to take on, the way in which they collaborate with their own teams and with partners and suppliers, and that the notion of collaboration is not going to be fully satisfied by authoring, think Google Docs, by communications, think Slack, think Teams, think threaded communications, and by file sync and share platforms. So SmartSheet came about by, again, graduating people from that good old-fashioned, let me just track a list of something for a project and process, and actually build a solution for that. Thanks, Margaret.
No, that's helpful, Mark, and I really appreciate that background on the company. And you know, you kind of described, you know, I'll stick with you for a second, Mark. You described a lot of the challenges that you face in the market and kind of how the company itself is evolving. When you look at those things, I mean, how is your company kind of preparing itself, and how are you overcoming some of those challenges and really differentiating yourself against, you know, all those, you mentioned a number of different technologies, obviously, that people are there. How are you guys differentiating yourselves? How are you really kind of meeting those challenges, as you said, of meeting that diverse set of customers from 20 to 2 million, as you mentioned?
Well, I think one of the great challenges for us, and as we talk about category design, is how do you develop something which is where every one of your prospective customers has this tendency to really embrace their bad habits. It's almost like this incumbency of bad habits, where I know it's hard, I know it's manual, I know there's a cost to doing it, and when you share with them a better way, they say, wow, that sounds really awesome. And then when they say, hey, I'd love that better, awesome way, and you say, well, here's the cost of doing that. And I'm not talking like dollar cost, I'm talking effort cost. And they go, ooh, that sounds hard. Maybe I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. So for us, it's about how do you get people to, one, understand the possibility that there is actually a better way and that doesn't impose a huge amount of pain on them to achieve. So that's one of the big challenges. And the other one is, how do you, when you have 150,000 trials coming in a month, how do you actually prosecute, segment, support, and pursue these opportunities? So as we were talking a second ago about, you know, if you want to be the category winner, get prepared for scale. And what may have worked when we were serving, you know, 285 customers, you can't run that same playbook at 70,000. So how do you continuously evolve the process, evolve your messaging, evolve how you cater to clients in a way that doesn't abandon like what got the company working initially, but is aware and relevant to the sort of the new situation.
Hey, Mark, if I could just, sorry, Ranga, if I could just underscore your point, Mark. Last year at about this time in the spring, the Brookings Institute and MIT came out with some research around the sort of state of entrepreneurial businesses and startups in the U.S., and the Wall Street Journal covered the research, and the headline in the journal said, and I quote, "The crisis in American entrepreneurship." And when I saw that, I thought, crisis, you know, somebody that's been in and around Silicon Valley for the better part of 20 years, I thought everybody and their brother and sisters doing a startup. But it turns out that's not true at all, that more companies die in America today every week than are founded, and that we're at the lowest level of entrepreneurship in recorded American history, and the millennials are on track to be the least entrepreneurial generation in American history. And interestingly enough, one of the things the research report points to is an inability to scale the business.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at that and I think about NetSuite, and I think about all of the other, particularly cloud-based, easy up and on kind of technologies that we have today. And it blows my mind because entrepreneurs have access to technology today that you had to be a Fortune 500 bank to have as recently as 5 or 6 years ago. And yet, in spite of the decrease in the technology costs and how much more awesome technology is, and therefore enabling businesses, A, we're at this low level, and B, one of the big causes of failure is inability to scale.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, Chris, one of the points that I think people, I think entrepreneurs sometimes confuse is they confuse the ability to scale dial tone with the ability to scale customer engagement. Right? So, yeah, we can spool up capacity immediately, but how are you going to deal with when you have a first blip in your service and you get 3,000 cases in 6 minutes? How are you going to deal with that? And it's fascinating how people, they get confused with like, oh my God, I can do all this amazing stuff at scale and spend the money. And it's like, yeah, the real world, like when you're engaging with customers, you can destroy your brand perception if you don't get back to people. You miss set expectations. And I think that's part of it, which has been just a fascinating learning over these years, how important that dimension of the problem is.
That's kind of an amazing, when you think about the scale, what you just described, Mark, of 3,000 cases in 6 minutes, I'm guessing that's not just a made-up stat that has happened. So that's a pretty amazing amount of scale that you have to meet.
Yeah, and fortunately, those happen very, very rarely over the case of 2 or 7 years.
That's good. That's good. That hopefully will make things easier. Greg, from your perspective, you know, kind of you're more on the product side. You know, can you relate to you know with similar types of challenges, or how is it different in your world?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Mark because we are a SmartSheet customer as well, and we adopted that 4 or 5 years ago, and it has definitely helped us organize our thoughts, our to-do list, and put some structure into some of our processes. So we love the product and are very happy with it, Mark. Thank you. The challenges we face, I think, are pretty typical for any brand working in the action and venture sports market. You know, we face stiff competition. We have deflationary prices and margin as a product or category becomes more of a commodity, and there's no barrier to entry. Our intellectual property, our product innovations have a very limited window of opportunity due to, you know, offshore production where factories typically produce 4 or 5 different brands, and your innovation quickly migrates onto your competitor's product with, you know, kind of overnight almost. And, you know, the other fact is that, you know, retail consumer buying behavior is rapidly changing with online sales, and we're seeing that our customers are, you know, highly educated now. When somebody, you know, is passionate about a sport, they spend some time researching and are oftentimes way more educated than, you know, a retail sales staff member might be on a particular product, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
And then, you know, in terms of like overcoming some of these challenges, you know, I really like what Chris had to say and you know, about category creation. And, you know, we view this as the most important thing with our business. we're constantly, our teams in the market, trying to identify and establish these trends in water sports to, kind of be ahead of the game. And, there's a trend happening right now called foil boarding. And foil boarding has been around for a long time, like since the 60s probably, but it's never made it like mainstream. And right now we're seeing it affecting sailing, kiteboarding, wakeboarding, surfing, paddleboarding, and even windsurfing. And, maybe it's from the America's Cup kind of, I don't know if everybody's seen the America's Cup boats and the foiling that's been going on. I mean, they were in the Bay Area a couple years ago. But 2 years ago, we decided we're going to be the leaders in foil boarding. And our product and our design team and everybody has been committed to this. And we have our kiteboarding foil in the market. We have our wakeboarding foil in the market. Our surf and subfoil boards are coming. Our windsurfing foils in the market. And, we're really trying to establish this leadership role in this new category of foil boarding as the thought leaders, the product leaders, and the company to be like, hey, these guys are experts in the foil boarding category, right? Another big initiative was,
Hey, Greg, I hate to interrupt you, but to underscore what you're saying, I'm just laughing on mute because literally last night, a very good friend of mine and his family who live on Maui, he's an extraordinary surfer and surf photographer, came to visit for a few days. And as we're having dinner, one of the things he said to me is, hey, dude, you really got to try this foil boarding, man. Everybody on Maui's doing it. It's awesome. And he's given me the whole sales pitch. So I don't know. That's not any data, but at least in Santa Cruz, that's a surf town. I haven't seen anybody do it. But here we have guys from Maui coming over here trying to condition us about this new category.
It's true, and we launched an inbound marketing strategy about 6 months ago called Foil Academy, and it's a free online course where we build the course out with tutorials and it's each specific sports category. And I think we've had over 6,000 people already register for Foil Academy, and our goal is to nurture those leads through the sales funnel as they complete the course and hit different milestones, to encourage them to learn more about the product or when they're ready to purchase a product that we already own in the mind of the consumer, that our product is a trusted, safe purchase for that consumer getting into foil boarding. So, we consider that more the blue ocean. Right now, a lot of our categories are in the Red Sea category where the prices are deflationary and the margins are shrinking, right? So I guess that sums up our kind of challenges and then how we're trying to overcome some of those challenges.
That's awesome, Greg. Well, just in the last few minutes, maybe just one other question I want to ask both to you and to Mark, which is, I mean, what's fascinating, obviously, and of course I'm biased, but both of you, very different companies, very different, no competition at all, obviously, between the two of you, but you're both very aggressive or avid users of NetSuite. So. If you can just talk a little bit about how NetSuite's part of that success and how it's helping you, both of your companies, and maybe, Mark, if you want to start, and then Greg, you want to go, which is just talk a little bit about how NetSuite's helping enable some of both the initiatives that you guys both described in terms of scale and also differentiation.
Yeah, I'll kick it off here. I think there were a few dimensions that we were trying to solve for, and one of the big ones in SaaS is how we manage our revenue recognition. And we have a model in which 40% of our new business comes in self-directed, no engagement with sales. And that is a credit card type model, pretty straightforward to recognize. And that ranges all the way up into invoice-based processes with special terms, multiple SKUs on those. And again, back to the scaling point that Christopher mentioned earlier, scaling challenges around how do you process thousands of invoices in a month? How do you recognize those? When you have renewals, how are those, does the system do work for you, or do you have to hand crank each of those? So the main driver for NetSuite was not only enabling our large customers to self-service. We get a couple thousand inquiries from our 70,000 customers a month on the finance dimension. What is my bill? how can I pay it, how can I split payment, all sorts of things, across divisions at large codes. So the self-service aspect was one driver, but the suite billing aspect was a huge one. So when you have a long, multi-year engagements with clients or relationships, how do you establish that payment relationship or that billing relationship and then have the system do incremental changes to seat count as they grow? How do you do ongoing bill preparation and sending, online payment? There was a lot of manual process with the previous platform that we had that NetSuite has really had a big impact on. The other one was we were able to reduce the whole revenue recognition and close cycle by 3 days after we went live with NetSuite in February. So those are big numbers, and as we prepare the company for further scale from $100 million to $250 million in the next 2.5, 3 years, that platform is just fundamental to being able to confidently move forward. And the event of the cutover, you can probably imagine I was pretty nervous on Feb 1 when we were cutting over systems. It was a complete non-event, and it was the best kind of non-event ever. So huge kudos to the NetSuite team and the platform for helping guide us through that process.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. And how about you, Greg?
Well, yeah, so we've been a customer for, I believe, 10 years. We were kind of an early adopter, I guess, of NetSuite. And I have to credit, a large portion of our success to our CEO for selecting the NetSuite platform because, it's helped us grow and basically it helped us grow in a really efficient and scalable manner, right? The ERP was our first product, and just having that, the access to that transparent real-time information across the whole company is the single source of truth is what I call it. And NetSuite kind of is the Bible, I think we added One World a few years ago, and that was a key thing for us because we were able to launch our new brands of Ride Engine and Moonshine almost simultaneously without adding a single new employee. So our employees now do 3 brands, 1 customer service team, 1 sales team, 1 accounting team, 1 shipping team, and we just toggle between the 3 companies and have been able to grow the overall business by adding brands but not human resources. And that was, an incredible thing for our business. We also used the Suite Commerce platform, which allowed us to build a B2B and a B2C shopping experience across all 3 brands at the same time and basically give us a modern experience that was, kind of like almost that omni-channel thing where the consumer and the B2B customer were using the same interface. Our field sales reps, the guys out there working, NetSuite has given them the tools to become what I consider a modern sales professional in our industry. They're not just a sales rep anymore. They have access to all the information to become a true solution provider for their wholesale B2B accounts, giving them real-time information, helping them grow their business. And without access to that information, you're just another sales rep out there kind of, winging it in the dark, right? So I credit NetSuite hugely in the past 10 years to where we've come as a whole company.
Well, thank you, Greg, for that, and thank you, Mark, and also Chris for your comments. Unfortunately, I think we're basically at the top of the hour, and we could probably continue on for quite a while, I'm sure, but just want to be sensitive to everyone's time, and we'll go ahead and wrap up things now. And just wanted to let everyone know that this call has been recorded, and we'll be happy to follow up with both the slides and the recording for anyone that's interested. We want to thank everyone for spending time with us today on today's webinar. And again, I wanted to thank both Chris, Greg, and Mark for your participation today, and really appreciate and hope to speak to you guys again in the future.
Thank you again for joining us today. This concludes today's web conference. You may now disconnect. Speakers, please hold the line.